I'm very happy to bring Skinny Beef aboard this podcast as a new sponsor. If you go to www.skinnybeef.com, use coupon code ALEX10, you can buy all of your beef over there. It is 98% lean, so obviously you can save a lot on your dietary fats. So this is mainly going to be the beef for contest prep individuals, so you can still get the amino acid profile of beef without having all that extra fat in there, and so you can either save your fat for other places, place them at other periods of the day, or whatever you actually need to do. Again, check out Skinny Beef at skinnybeef.com. Coupon code ALEX10. Thank you guys so much, Skinny Beef. Thank you for having me aboard. What's up, everyone? Thank you so much for tuning in to Beast Fitness Radio. The podcast you're about to listen to was a podcast I actually recorded on my way home from the gym, so I didn't realize at the time, but the audio is kind of poor. But with that being said, I had a good talk with myself about this topic of blasting and cruising, and I wanted to go ahead and publish it anyway because I honestly didn't feel like redoing it, and I feel like the quality of the audio isn't that bad, but kind of bear with it. No matter what, the take-home messages can be massive, so make sure to take your notes. I hope you guys enjoy, and other than this video, audio quality is going to be perfect on everything coming forward.
What's up, everyone? Online prep coach Alex Pickle here with theprepcoach.com. Wanted to go ahead, and I'm actually on my way home from the gym. Due to the restrictions and all that kind of fun stuff, I couldn't go to my normal gym. So I've been working at a different gym. I figured since I have about a 45-minute drive on the way back home, why not talk about cruising? There's a question. I have a thread over on my forum, theprepcoachforum.com, and it's basically requesting videos and topics and things like that. Because honestly, I have so much content to make. I have a list of my own, but I really want to get your guys' feedback and just, keep making things for you. At the end of the day, I'll never run out of content to make, but if I can make things more specific to what you guys are asking, then cool. So, cruising. Cruising is the big question. And by the way, I hope the audio on this turns out okay. I'm doing it on the voice memo portion of my iPhone. So, no matter what the quality of this is, as long as it's not terrible, I will put it out. But the topic of this episode is really cruising. I'm not really sure where I wanted to begin with this because I literally just decided to do it on the way home. I usually listen to different podcasts and things like that. But either way, the topic of cruising. Now, I think this is mainly in regards to the fact that everyone always talks about how to blast, but the cruising aspect seems kind of be forgotten, not only on the pharmaceutical aspect, but on the training, nutrition, over-the-counter health supplementation, and all that stuff. So I want to go down and really just break down at least how I see cruising for both males and females, because obviously there's a difference. So first, we're going to take the male equation, and we'll do it on a pharmaceutical aspect for both genders, and then kind of proceed from there. Now, with males, we are assuming that we're staying at, and again, let's just say that this is an athlete, this is someone who is basically making the decision to undertake drug use for the rest of their life. That's the kind of person I'm talking about right now, someone who is already blasting and cruising. So this means you are not doing a PCT, this means you are not coming off, this means you are having periods to manage systemic stress, dumb down systemic fatigue, and really just allow yourself to actually be healthy for a little bit. So that is and again, giving all the credit in the world to Broderick Chavez, my good friend, because he did coin this term, and I always want to give credit where that's due, athletic cruise. So that is defined as about 2 to 3 milligrams per kilogram of body weight of actual androgens. Now, when we're looking at that equation, what can it be made up of? We're looking at usually a testosterone base or all testosterone. So that could be the fact we have testosterone there to drive just us being males, meaning our libido, our overall functioning. Remember, a lot of people like to get up in arms about, testosterone, either high or low doses, and look at what that drug actually does in terms of its changes on performance and energy systems. Its changes on GTO stimulation. All those kind of cool interactions from an actual performance aspect make testosterone a pretty good option. So I'm not here to shit on testosterone dosages. I have been someone who has used people anywhere from 1 milligram per kilogram of body weight of testosterone all the way up to maybe 10 milligrams per kilogram of body weight of testosterone, maybe even higher, depending on the individual, depending on their response, depending on what they have access to. There's a lot of things to kind of take into consideration on this one. But essentially, that's kind of what we're looking at. Basically, finding your amount of testosterone that you respond extremely well to with not getting side effects, and also having some basic understandings of drug interactions and kinetics and dynamics as a whole. Remember, kinetics and dynamics are not the same thing. It is what the drug does to the body versus what the body does to the drug. So 2 separate categories of study there. But whenever we're looking at that, let's just say you're the individual who can respond to, we'll say about 1.5, 2-ish milligrams per kilogram of body weight of testosterone. Let's say that's where you get enough estrogen functioning, enough downstream estrogen cascades and metabolites that you feel good. Your libido is good, your performance is good. That's how we want to dictate our testosterone dosage, how we feel, also with side effects. So let's say that that's sitting right at about 2. That means we potentially have an entire other milligram per kilogram of body weight to work with. So when we look at our physique, when we look at our goals, let's say we are missing a lot of neurological motor learning aspects. Let's say that we are already big and strong, but you know what? For whatever reason, we are just not learning the motor patterns properly. We're not the best at actually doing the act of contracting, things like that. Maybe we're looking for an excitation aspect of something like a DHT derivative. Maybe on the opposite side of the coin, you are a smaller person, small bones. I don't want to say fragile, but small joints, the guy who's always been skinny. Maybe you need something more in the volumizing aspect of things, being an androgen. Maybe you are either or category from a body type, but you know what? From a joint aspect, you are just so ridiculously strong naturally that maybe you need a little more osteoblastic and colloid interactions, trying to drive more soft tissue formation, and actual joint recovery, longevity, whatever you want to call it. Maybe that'd be more of an androgen. So you see where I'm going. You ask yourself a bunch of these questions, and then you fill in the gaps. So we have our androgen set at 2 to 3 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. I would say if you are a competitor, probably stay at the 3. If you're a non-competitor, probably stay at the 2. It may seem like a little bit of a difference, but you could be up or down 0.5 as well. Look at myself. I'm 265 pounds, so that's right around 120 kilograms, and I'm taking in 400 milligrams of total androgens per week. That is my cruise. That's slightly above 3 milligrams per kilogram, but I am fine with that because I know my response. I'm keeping track on blood work, and I honestly have no intention of lasting for the foreseeable future. So keep everything in context. Now, on top of that, we have some other backbone players that could be done here. This is where we look into the peptide category. This is where we look into, I'll call it the ancillary category. There's a lot of other shit we could put in that category. It's going to kind of be dependent on your periodization as a whole. Remember, periodization is just planning. So are you planning on stepping on stage in 20 weeks, in 6 months, in 12 months, whatever? That's how it's going to dictate how you use your peptides and how you use these other ancillary drugs. Because whenever androgens go down, peptides inherently can go up. And the opposite, whenever you start blasting a high amount of androgens, you can either keep peptides the same or lower them, so essentially stressing different systems and different complexes and different cascades at different times. Now remember, I'm not the first person to invent that. People have been doing that for as long as growth hormone and insulin have been around, so it's nothing new or novel. But I have really been favoring that over the past year or so because you just see the results you can actually get with people, meaning you can grow, and again, bear with me on this one because there will be arguments on here, but this is what I've seen in my experience, and I've been able to put on muscle tissue consistently while getting people healthy and also while, I don't want to say slowly deteriorating their health, but basically while blasting. So in a high androgen environment, those are the drugs that are stressing our overall health systems, I will say systemically, the most. So long-term, what's going to build the most muscle tissue? Androgens. Long-term, what's going to cause the most detrimental health side effects? Androgens. So because of that, during that period of blasting, we are inherently unhealthy. We are apparently basically accumulating more systemic fatigue. That's okay, because then once we flip the script and we cruise, all of a sudden we have more health to work with. We have more stress to work with. That could potentially mean that training and nutritional vectors change, and now we have this piggy bank of additional stress to use that now we could grow simply from being healthier and our body actually functioning more properly. So if you follow me, when we blast, we're unhealthier, but we're growing faster because of the extra drugs. That's just how that works. And then when we cruise, we're also growing a little bit faster because of how much healthier we are. So it's a fine balance, and obviously you can't just push either one of those indefinitely and expect to always make progress. And it's not like, oh, I'm going to be the healthiest and grow the fastest, or I'm going to be the most unhealthy but still grow the fastest. Doesn't work like that. It's a combination ratio balance of the two. So you're basically going to be basing your peptide usage off of those androgens and how you plan to actually blast and cruise. So that is on the male aspect. Background dosages of something like a metformin, to me, can stay in year-round. Something as well as like a 1 to 2 IU of growth hormone can basically stay in there year-round. And then again, you can titrate that up or down depending on your actual periodization, programming, all that stuff as a whole. Now we have the female side of things. This is where, remember, the durations are different. Systemic fatigue and accumulation set in And again, about 12 to 20 weeks. So all of my periodization, I like to stick to about 15 to 16, to be completely honest. That's how I've always designed my training mesocycles. And because of that, that's how I've always implemented my drug usage and my nutritional vectors and all that kind of fun stuff. So whenever we look at females, knowing that we have that window to work with, as all humans have, we have to remember side effect profiles. With females, side effects are all about duration. I mean, obviously dosage plays a role, but it's really more about the duration. So with most women, I prefer, and again, you can extend these windows depending on the person, depending on the degree of competition, depending on so many factors, response to side effects, access to drugs, all that stuff, basic periodization like we said before. But in general, I like to stay at about 4 to 6 week windows. To me, that's kind of where that sweet spot is, where 4 weeks is just enough to get a lot of the anabolic action, but not long enough to get a lot of the actual negative side effects. And then 6 weeks, okay, that is where maybe potentially we are getting, maybe some side effects are building up, but we're getting a little bit more anabolic action. So it's a trade-off. Now, remember, this is not really for the hyper muscular female. We also have that this consideration is not for someone experiencing female athletic HRT. I consider female athletic HRT anywhere from about, it works out to be about 3-ish to about 7. We'll maybe say 10. So let's say 3 to 10 milligrams of actual testosterone per week. That's total. That is nothing. If you would pull that back on an insulin syringe, it's like a drop of nothing. You barely feel like you're applying any drug. To me, those two categories are separate columns. So if, let's just say, you're a healthy female who's not hypermuscular, so you haven't acquired 20 to 30 pounds of lean tissue above your frame, something like that. If you're a female bodybuilder, if you're a professional female, again, you don't really fit into this category. So if you are not in those categories, then this is where you are sticking to the 4 to 6 week duration. This is where we are looking at the side effects being accumulated from the masculinizing side of things on the male, or on the actual androgen side of things rather. So that means that if we're doing 4 to 6 week stints, we essentially don't want to use androgens for more than 4 to 6 weeks. What does that mean during the off time? Well, that means let's drive other vectors, just like with males, to still make sure that we are at supraphysiological levels of anabolism. So let's use a generic example of someone who's trying their first cycle as a female, let's say moderately, let's say average. Average genetics, average genetic response to drugs, average muscle bellies, average insertions, average lifestyle, literally average. Not fat, not overly skinny, just kind of average. That kind of female, let's say she would start off with a weak anabolic driver like a clenbuterol. Clenbuterol, again, remember, it does drive mTOR and global anabolism actually quite well in females. It's funny because if you look at some of, at least what they do with clenbuterol in cattle, that is the main driver of actual anabolism and of tissue expression and synthesis. The problem is the dosages, and humans obviously can't tolerate that from a cardiac aspect. But clenbuterol does have a lot of anabolic traits, which is awesome. Males, you're not going to be getting much out of it because, again, the dosage issues there, and we have other options as androgens. But with females, a lower dosage of clenbuterol, literally a 20 microgram dosage over the long haul, will drive those background drivers on anabolism and act as a weak anabolic. So let's say we have that as your base, and let's say during this cruise, we are also choosing to implement something like a growth hormone. So we have a weak anabolic driver, and then we also have another anabolic driver on the myonuclear domain aspect side of things in donation. We have that changes with pre-adipocytes. We have those genetic changes and alterations with nuclear transcription factors. We have growth hormone basically being the recomp drug of just awesomeness. And I say that very generically. Go back and listen to my complete guides to growth hormone, and you'll kind of understand why I'm such a big fan of growth hormone at any dosage. Half an IU to freaking 20 IUs, depending on the person, depending on the circumstance, and all that good stuff. But we're essentially looking at growth hormone as being an ability and a driver on anabolism in acute and chronic vectors, on lipolytic cascades, acute and chronic vectors, on soft tissue remodeling and longevity from an actual health standpoint. Again, acute and chronic, nutrient partitioning. You can go down the list, and growth hormone is going to have a pretty positive interaction. A lot of people don't understand this, but look back to growth hormone receptors and look at that history. What was it, a couple thousand years ago? Look at how those receptors have changed over time. You look at interaction with the EPO, interactions with that receptor, interactions with the prolactin receptors and things like that of that category, and you understand, growth hormone is also acting through those mildly other anabolic pathways, as well as the deiodinization enzymatic-based pathways, which is another vector in actual cascade to drive anabolism indirectly. So, okay, we understand that. Growth hormone's freaking awesome, essentially. So we have that female who's taking in the low-dose clenbuterol, and let's say they started off with one, let's even do half an IU of growth hormone. Let's place that before bed because they're looking for global systemic recovery. Let's just say we could also even place that either before bed or post-workout if we're looking at specific myotraumatic events and trying to produce those kind of growth factors. Okay, let's do half an IU of growth hormone post-workout instead of before bed. And we do that for 4 to 6 weeks. And now, okay, we could switch to an actual anabolic. This is where maybe something, let's say again, they don't care about some fluid retention. They want the least amount of masculinizing side effects, and they want the most amount of bang for their buck. Let's literally start with a 5 milligrams of NPP per week. 5 milligrams of NPP, natural phenylpropionate, per week. I said 5 milligrams for a reason. That is, again, if we're looking at a female at the height of actual development, puberty, all that kind of fun stuff, which is the height. It's about maximum milligram per day. That's considering athletics. That's considering a lot of things. Most women aren't going to be producing that, at least from what I've seen. So we want to err on the side of caution and say start there so we have time to build up. Or at least we know this first cycle, their response. And then after those 4 to 6 weeks, we go back to the growth hormone clenbuterol. Another 4 to 6 weeks, we go back to the NPP, but we raise the dosage or we do something based on the response to the drug beforehand. Now, we can keep a chronic intake of metformin in the background. We can add insulin to that blasting phase. So we can maybe do NPP and insulin, drive a little bit more body weight, get a little bit stronger during those 4 to 6 weeks, and then recycle back to the clen, recycle back to the growth hormone, pull off the insurance, and not get side effects. So you can do that multiple different ways, but essentially that's how I would set up cruising for a male and then for a female. Now, this is where I think people, again, misunderstand it. And I want to make sure I repeat what I said earlier. Whenever we are blasting, we are driving systemic fatigue up. Whenever we are cruising, we are driving systemic fatigue down. So if you play your cards right with nutrition, with training, if your periodization is set up properly, you can get away with consistently driving supraphysiological levels of anabolism year-round. Now, let's be honest, whenever we're blasting, there's more drugs in play. Are we going to be expressing more protein? Are we going to be setting out more potential cascades for long-term anabolism and acute anabolism to basically build muscle tissue faster? Yeah, there's no way around that. But when you're cruising, I hate the concept that everyone thinks that they're losing muscle tissue. If you're cruising properly, you should continue to be building muscle tissue, just not as fast as when you were blasting. Let's say as a natural athlete, male or female, let's say you were able to express 500 grams of protein per year in actual actin myosin, real contractile tissue. When you're cruising, now you should be maybe at, 750 grams. And whenever you're actually cruising, maybe you're able to express 1,000 grams. Obviously, those numbers are absolutely wrong and terrible. For females, I have, and again, this is purely just my experience. I'm not sure what other people can do or where people set this number at. But I can consistently put on about 5 to 8 pounds of actual contractile tissue on a female per year. And for males, I can consistently put on 8 to 15 pounds of contractile tissue per year. I feel like that's very reasonable. I don't think those are unreasonable statements. I have seen multiple other people do that, and I just really think if you're doing things right on the blasting and cruising side of things, that those are very reasonable numbers. So if you work out your math, that could be whatever. Remember, there's also hyper or hypo responders, but that's the general range I see. So that is usually how I would set up blasting and cruising for males and females on the pharmaceutical side of things. Now, what do you do with everything else? Well, pretty simple. Your training periodization is based off of your year-long goal. So where are you trying to be at 365 days from now? Are you trying to step on stage a year from now? Are you trying to just build as much tissue in a year and then reassess and come back to maybe competing the following year? Because of that, that is how you're going to set up your plan. So you plan a year in advance. After you plan your year out in advance, you plan your training. And then from there, you look and you say, okay, where do the drugs fit in? Because the drugs are meant to be a secondary complement to everything else, okay? The nutrition is going to be tracking in the background. And whenever you are actually periodizing these properly, drugs are coming secondary to your traditional actual planning and mesocycle. So if you set up your training mesocycle properly, you're going to be able to see, oh, drugs need to be here, here, and here because these are the final windows of a contest prep, or this is the final peak of my off season when calories are higher, body weight is highest, and I need to be driving anabolism as hard as possible because I have a due date to be on stage, 30 weeks after that set point. So that is I don't want to say pocketbook guideline to blasting and cruising, but specifically the cruising side of things for males and females. I think that covers a lot of aspects, and I think the final point I will cover is probably the health side of things. So over-the-counter supplements and blood work. So blood work, I'm a bigger fan, and again, remember, I am not the only person who knows how to do shit right. There's plenty of amazing coaches out there, so this is just my way of doing things. But I prefer to get blood work done at the peak of a cruise and at the peak of a blast. So we are seeing our blood work at our absolute worst and then at our absolute best. Once we get our blood work done at our absolute worst, at the peak of a blast, that's when we can see, okay, genetically, what goes out of range? Or because of this drug profile, what goes out of range? Knowing that is going to tell you exactly which over-the-counter supplements to take, which drugs to avoid, how to do your aerobic work, and how to really structure your nutrition as a whole, and how to make sure you're not going to die whenever you're 50. Male or female, doesn't matter. Look at your lipid panel. Is there an issue there? Look at your actual cardiac functioning. Is there an issue there? Look at your liver and actual, so if you're looking at your kidney functioning, look at those two aspects. Look at your neurological interventions. A lot of people downplay the psychological effects of drug use. Not only that, but also the psychological effects of our actual environment of competing and competition. We are literally making body dysmorphia issues, and we are literally making actual eating disorders happen. That's kind of part of our sport and lifestyle. I mean, some people can get away with it, but a lot of people, we're just not normal. Bodybuilding, physique-based sports, even a lot of these actual strength sports like strongman, powerlifters, things like that, we're not a normal class of humans. We're just not. And especially once we get so far away from human physiology and biology on the drug side of things, we slowly start to become a creature that's never been studied in literature. So science only matters so much. So these research papers only matter so much. And we really need to rely on research of our own doing. So actual experience to really kind of be the arbiter of where do we need to go from here, combined with a little bit of common sense. So you do that, and then we essentially when do you want to be healthy? That's going to tell you when to take your over-the-counter health supplements. Normal person think, I want to always be healthy. I cannot stand whenever people say they only take certain supplements to make up for their genetic deficiencies whenever they're blasting, because that's whenever the systemic stress is high. Well, guess what? Your systemic health is also lower because you weren't correcting those panels before, when you were already at the peak of less drug intake, or at the, what would that be, the antithesis of that? So at the minimal amount of drug intake. So what that means is you get your baseline, and these over-the-counter health supplements, this goes for everyone. You need your baseline vitamins, you need your baseline minerals. I'm a big fan of still having additional baseline greens and reds, so something like a greens and reds product, because I just don't think people can get enough phyto and micronutrients out there. I just really don't. Maybe I am the exception to that rule, but I still do it. But I was having about a pound of spinach kale per day, pound of fruit per day, and that actually did hurt my hematology panel. So I was one of the idiots that just did it too much. So you can't have too much of a good thing. But even at that, if you were having a controlled and proper greens and reds intake, I still feel like a greens and reds kind of product is only going to help. Because remember, we are not normal humans anymore. We need a little bit more help on that systemic health aspect. That's why we take vitamins. We need more vitamins as enhanced athletes because of the need to cover those systemic health gaps. And we need more minerals because of the upregulation at receptors in the entire upregulation and our biological systems, our enzymatic, ribosomal systems, everything as a whole. We need more of those cofactors and coefficients. So we need vitamins and minerals and reds and greens to cover all those aspects, just health and just proper functioning of actual, I will say, performance enhancement. So from there, if you look at that list, vitamins, minerals, greens and reds, those are the bare minimum. From there, then you correct the gaps. Then you correct the deficits. I feel like everyone should be having some kind of an EPA, DHA product, whether that be fish oil, krill oil. Just anecdotally, I've seen females respond a lot better to krill oil than males. But at the same time, you could really make an argument for either way. As long as the dose is pretty much equated, I feel like you pretty much drive the same health factors on both aspects. And remember, those essential fatty acids, unless if you're getting enough fish per week, which many people aren't, it's just, not feasible. So we want to make sure we have those essential fatty acids in there. They're doing a lot of other things than just, again, the arbitrary term of saying overall health. So there's anti-inflammation cascades, there's actual neurological benefiting cascades on the anti-inflammation side, on the reduction in plaque side, on the everything side. There is tons of things with fish oils. I don't need to go on and on about EPA and DHA needs, but that's another supplement that I would take there. And then from there, again, it's what you need. You have an immaculate lipid panel. If you do, then why add niacin and aged garlic and all these other things? If you have a terrible kidney panel and EGFR functioning is terrible, why not attack that from an architectural and enzymatic aspect and throw in some astragalus and some milk thistle? To me, that makes sense. You're correcting a gap and deficit in your health. If you have issues with your hematology panel, again, we are looking at adding in aerobic work, fruits and vegetables. We are looking at actually maybe adding in something to chelate some iron out of our blood, like an IP6, EGCG, a lot of things there. But we're trying to fix a deficit in our health. So I hope that makes 100% sense. This is going to be called, I don't know, maybe the complete guide to cruising for males and females. I really want to make sure I covered just about every kind of aspect of this conversation, and I think I did. If you guys have follow-up questions, maybe I'll do a long, drawn-out Q&A for just cruising, and then maybe make it into a podcast and publish that for everyone. Because I want to make sure that this topic is very well understood, because it wasn't until people on my forum brought that up that I realized, oh, wow, I've never actually talked about that. So that is the complete guide to cruising. I'm actually recording this in the morning after the workout on Christmas Eve. So if I did stumble on some words, that's because I am post-workout, and most of my blood is actually trying to go back into my viscera. So I'm not going to my brain. Either way, guys, I hope you have a tremendous Christmas. Merry Christmas. I hope you enjoyed.